It is 4 in the morning, and I am standing in my kitchen with a jar of dried peppermint leaves in one hand and a rag in the other. And outside my window the frost is thick enough that I could write my name in it with a fingernail. 12 degrees! 12 degrees! And not one spider in this house. I have my coffee going on the stove, the old percolator that whistles instead of beeps. And while I wait for it, I walk the baseboards the way I do every morning this time of year, just looking. No webs in the corner by the pantry. None along the window over the sink, where the morning light usually catches them if they are there. None in the mudroom, where the boots sit and the cold comes in every time the door opens. 3 miles down the road, the Millers who are English, who have the vinyl siding and the pest control truck that comes every single month, they still find webs in the corners of every room by October. Their boy told me once, standing in my barn while his father talked prices for hay, that he found 4 different spiders in his own bedroom in a single week, and that his mother had started checking his shoes before he put them on in the morning. They pay that truck $90 a visit every month all year, whether they see a spider or not. I have paid nothing. Not once. Not in the 11 years I have lived in this house, which I built with my own hands, board by board, starting the spring after I turned 26. The same spring I married my wife. My name is Elias Yoder. I am Amish. By the end of this, you will know exactly what my mother kept in a coffee tin by the back door, what it costs, where you find it, and how to use it so that spiders leave your house and do not come back. You will know which room to start in, how much of it is too much, and the one mistake that makes people give up on this before it has had a chance to work. Stay with me, because near the end I am going to tell you something about spiders that most people, English or Amish, never learn, and once you hear it, you will understand why this works instead of just believing it works. It has to do with how a spider actually experiences your house, through its legs and not its eyes, and once you understand that, you will never look at a spray bottle of peppermint water the same way again. I want to start with why you have not heard this before, because it is a fair question and you deserve a fair answer. It is not that some company is hiding a secret from you. It is simpler and, in a way, sadder than that. Pest control became a subscription. Once a service is something you pay for every month instead of something you do once a season with your own hands. There is no reason for anyone to teach you the version that costs $4 and takes 20 minutes. Nobody sat in a room and decided to keep this from people. It just stopped being useful to anybody to tell you. Think about how a household used to pass down this kind of knowledge. A mother showed a daughter, a father showed a son, and it moved from hand to hand at the kitchen table or out in the garden, not in a magazine and not on a label. When families started moving more, when fewer children grew up in the same house their parents grew up in, that chain got harder to keep unbroken. Somewhere along the way, for a lot of English families, it broke. Not from malice, just from distance and busyness, and the fact that it is easier to write a check once a month than to remember what your grandmother used to do with a coffee tin. I do not fault anybody for that. I only want to hand the knowledge back to whoever wants it. Here is the part that is actually true, and you can look this up. Spiders sense the world mostly through their legs, using tiny hairs that pick up vibration and scent at the same time. That is well documented, and entomologists have studied it for decades. A spider does not smell the way a dog smells, with a nose lifted to the air. It reads the surface it is standing on, the same way your fingertips might read Braille, except every hair on every leg is doing that reading all at once. Most spiders that end up in your house are not there to bite you. They are there because insects are there, and insects are there because of food smells, standing water, and gaps in a house that let air and bugs move freely. Take away what draws the bugs and block the gaps, and the spiders mostly lose interest on their own. That is the actual mechanism. It is not a poison. It is not a trick. It is closing the door on the food source and making the surfaces they walk on say something they want to avoid. Think of it like a smell. You cannot stand filling a small room. You do not need to be sick to leave that room. You just leave, and you do not come back until the smell is gone. That is roughly what a strong peppermint scent does to a spider's sense organs, except it is even more direct for them, because they are not just smelling the air, they are walking across the very thing that carries the scent. It is a little like walking barefoot across a floor someone just mopped with something sharp and medicinal. You would notice it in your feet before you noticed it in your nose. A spider notices peppermint that same way. Through the legs it uses to feel out every room it enters, and it chooses another path. I will give you the honest caveat right now, because I promised I would not oversell this to you. This will not work if you have a serious infestation already established behind your walls, and it will not fully work if you never deal with the gaps letting bugs in the first place. This is prevention and mild correction, not an exorcism. If you already have dozens of spiders and egg sacs in a basement, you need to vacuum those out first before any of this will show you real results. Because peppermint discourages new spiders from moving in, it does not force an established one out of a nest it has already built. I am not going to pretend a jar of leaves undoes years of neglect. It does not. I will also tell you that the scent fades. That is simply the nature of a natural oil, instead of a manufactured chemical built to linger for months. You will need to reapply it, and I will tell you exactly how often in a moment. But understand going in that this is not a one-time application you forget about for a year. It is closer to watering a garden than it is to sealing a driveway. It asks a small amount of your attention on a regular basis, and in exchange it asks nothing of your wallet and nothing of your health. Here is what you need, and none of it is expensive. First, dried peppermint leaves or peppermint essential oil if you can find it, and you want the real oil, not a peppermint-scented cleaning spray, because those are cut with fragrance chemicals that fade in a day and do nothing. A small bottle of real peppermint oil runs about $6 to $9 at a feed store or a health shop, and it lasts most of a season. Hold the bottle up before you buy it. If the label lists fragrance instead of the plant name, put it back, because that is a synthetic copy, and a spider's legs know the difference even if your nose does not. Second, plain white vinegar, the cheap kind, $1.50 to $2 a gallon at any grocery store. You are not buying anything special here. The plainest jug on the bottom shelf is exactly right. Third, if you want the strongest version, food-grade diatomaceous earth, not the pool-grade kind. This is the mistake most people make, and it matters more than any other mistake on this list. Pool-grade diatomaceous earth is chemically treated and heat-processed differently, and breathing that dust regularly can genuinely irritate your lungs. Food-grade is milled from the same fossilized material, but processed to be safe to be around, even ingested in small amounts by livestock, which is exactly why farmers use it. It is safe around pets and children in the amounts we are talking about here, and it costs around $8 to $12 for a bag that will last a long while, most of a year if you are only using it along edges and corners. You want it clearly marked food grade on the bag, usually right on the front. If it does not say that in plain words, put it back and find one that does. You will also want a spray bottle, the kind you likely already have under your sink from an old cleaner, and a caulk gun if you do not already own one, which runs about $5 to $8 at any hardware store, and once you own it, you will use for a dozen other small repairs around the house for years to come. Now here is how my mother did it, and how I still do it every fall. The first thing you do is walk the outside of your house, slow in daylight, and find where the gaps are. Around windows, around the sill where the house meets the foundation, around any pipe or wire coming through the wall, around the place where the porch meets the siding, which is a spot people forget more than any other. These are the doors spiders and their food are using, whether you can see them clearly or not. You take a caulk gun, plain silicone caulk, $4 to $6 a tube, and you seal those gaps, running a bead the width of your smallest finger and smoothing it with a wet thumb if you want it neat. This step alone does more than any spray, and most people skip it because it is the least exciting part, the part with no smell and no visible result the same afternoon. Do not skip it. It is the difference between discouraging spiders and simply locking the door behind the ones already inside. After that, you mix 10 to 15 drops of the peppermint oil into a spray bottle of water, about 2 cups, and you shake it well before every use because oil and water do not mix on their own and will separate again within a few minutes of sitting still. You spray this along the baseboards, the corners of rooms, window sills, and door frames, working room by room so you do not miss any. Not soaked, just a light misting, enough that the room smells faintly of peppermint to you for the first hour and then fades for your nose but stays strong enough for theirs, since their sense of smell through those leg hairs is far more sensitive than ours. This is the part where most people get it wrong. They spray once, notice the smell fades by the next day, and assume it stopped working, when really it simply needs to be refreshed. Do this once a week for the first month, then once every 3 to 4 weeks after that to maintain it. Mark it on a calendar if you need to. It takes less time to do than it did to read this paragraph. For the basement or any damp area, this is where the diatomaceous earth comes in. You take a thin dusting, not a pile, along the very edges of the room where the floor meets the wall, working your way around the full perimeter. A thin, white line you can barely see is correct. A visible pile is wrong and wasteful, and it will only sit there looking like chalk dust without doing any more good than a thin line would. This works by drying out the outer layer of the insects the spiders are hunting, which removes their food supply gradually over about 1 to 2 weeks rather than overnight. So do not expect an instant change in the basement the way you might upstairs where the spray works faster. Total cost for a whole house, if you are buying all 3 items new along with the caulk and a spray bottle, comes to around $30 to $38, and the peppermint oil and diatomaceous earth alone will last you the better part of a year with regular reapplication. Total time for the first full treatment, walking the house, caulking, spraying every room, and dusting the basement, is about 2 hours on a Saturday morning, maybe closer to 3 if your house is older and has more gaps to find and seal. I remember my grandmother doing this before I was old enough to understand why. She kept dried peppermint in a coffee tin by the kitchen door, and every fall, right after the first hard frost warning, she would crush a handful between her palms and rub it along the window frames with her bare hands. No gloves, no spray bottle, just her hands and the smell filling the kitchen. I asked her once why she did it that way, and she said her mother did it that way, and her mother before that, and that some things you keep doing with your hands because the hands remember even when you stop thinking about why. I did not understand what she meant until I was grown and doing it myself, and now I do. I think about this every time I hear what an English family spends in a year on pest control contracts, because it adds up to more than most families spend on their winter heating. Multiply that by however many households are paying a monthly fee for something a jar of dried leaves and a tube of caulk could mostly handle, and you start to see a real cost, not just in dollars, but in a kind of forgetting. This is not really about spiders. It is about how much knowledge people used to carry in their own 2 hands that they now pay someone else to carry for them. That knowledge did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because nobody needed to remember it anymore. And slowly, 1 generation at a time, it slipped away from people who might have wanted it. So here is your plan for this weekend. Saturday morning, walk the outside of the house and find the gaps, and caulk everyone you find. Saturday afternoon, mix your peppermint spray and go along every baseboard and window sill in the house. If you have a damp basement or crawl space, lay your thin line of food-grade diatomaceous earth along the edges before you finish for the day. That is it. That is the whole plan. And by Sunday morning, you will already notice fewer webs forming in the corners you treated. Tell me in the comments where you live and what your basement or crawl space situation looks like, because I read every one of them, and I am curious how different this looks in different parts of the country. Next time, I want to tell you about the smell my uncle used to keep mice out of the grain shed, because it is not what you would expect, and it is not mothballs, and it works better than anything you can buy at a hardware store. Until then, seal the gaps in your walls, and trust the things that grow in your own garden more than the things that come in a truck. And remember the people who built this country with their hands, new things we are only just starting to remember.